This was my second year doing this, and just comparing 2025 to 2026, it was two distinctly different experiences, different outcomes, different energy. I've been pretty candid in other conversations about the challenges and the frustrations of last year, and some of the objective shortcomings that we had uh, this year. Ironically, where last year was one of the most difficult and kind of unfortunate experiences that I had professionally, this year was unequivocally one of the best experiences of my life. And specifically the week in Indianapolis that we were out there, um, like it was like a high. Everything was just a lot of fun, and everybody was like in a flow state. It was a really gratifying thing to experience, and um, we had 28 athletes that in some capacity were out there. So a really, really big group. Um, a lot of them very high end talent, projected to be very high draft picks. So there was kind of this ominous pressure that we felt really throughout the whole process, but it felt a little bit more intensified the week of the combine in Indianapolis. And I'm just really proud of everyone on this team for how they were able to handle that and respond to that, and really rise to the occasion. It was a special time. I think the main things that stick out to me comparing last year to this year were the appreciation of time, particularly with Les, with Chris, with everybody else on this team. Being out here last year, having the time to understand everybody better for who they are as people, better understanding of who they are as professionals, what they do well, where they struggle, what motivates them, what pulls them off course. That familiarity and kind of to an extent bonding time that we had proved to be unequivocally valuable, and it's good for, I think, me in particular to be reminded of things like that, because I get blindsided or get a little bit lost in those things don't really matter. Just get better at what you do your job, have the technical acuity, conduct yourself with professionalism. But like, I don't think as much about those intangible things. And I think the evidence that we have from last year to this year is very meaningful proof that the people that you work with, in whatever capacity it may be, there has to be a personal trust and a personal relationship that the professional side is developed from. And I think if you invert those, it doesn't really work the same. So that was definitely one of the primary takeaways that we had, or that I had from this year. The other takeaway is it certainly helps the job when the athletes are A plus. Um, High level athletes, high level character, really, really good dudes to be around. They made it very fun and engaging. It completely detested the narrative of the high level talent, pretentious, don't really give a shit attitude type of things that we hear. Those narratives just are not true. It's not the case. Every group of any sport or any collection of individuals is going to have people that are high caliber, and then people that just aren't quite as good people or whatever. So no community is immune to that. And this is one of the things that I get asked a lot, with regards to professional athletes versus Navy SEALs. And people just make this assumption that the Navy SEALs are all perfect and always on time and never a problem, never challenge anything. And then professional athletes, we always have to pull them along, and we got to motivate them, and they're going to show up late and they're not going to do the work. And like, I think there's a much smaller separation between that than people think at large. And I feel like this year was really good evidence of it. The athletes made this as easy as they possibly could on us. When you're trying to coordinate and organize 30 individuals across two different locations, all coming from different backgrounds, there's a lot of extraneous responsibility and stress that comes with that. And across all fronts, they did everything to make that easier for us, which, I know I certainly appreciate. The third thing I would say is that a plan is a proposal, not a contract. And this was probably the biggest specific takeaway that I had as it relates to myself and Les and Dusty and Chris, and kind of these different components that were coming together from speed and strength and performance therapy. We were constantly negotiating the entire way through. Here's what the plan is. For the most part, Les sets the plan. This is what the program looks like for the week. So this is what we want everyone to do, in theory or in perfect conditions. The role for Chris and I then became, okay, with this group plan and program that we have, we've got all these different guys that are at different spots right now or have a different health status. So how do we negotiate what is expected to be done versus what is capable of being done? And that's where I go back to the heuristic of a plan is a proposal, not a contract. Nothing is binding. This is a consistently fluid space, and we have to understand that there's going to be a dynamic nature to what we are putting in play for the athletes at all times and across all things. So I think that was probably the main tangible separator from last year, where this year we were able to negotiate right up until the points that they were on the field. We have the initial plan. We make immediate revisions or modifications for athletes that needed it. Then we get onto the field, and we may have athletes that we didn't account for in that first round of revisions that now we have to do something on the fly, or the adjustments that we made maybe weren't exactly what needed to be done, and so we renegotiate on the spot. And that was a very, again, seamless thing, because it is challenging, and there are biases on both sides. Chris and I are always going to lead with everything from the preservation of health. Les is always going to lead with everything from the how much can I get out of them every single day. And so there's a big separation in what those demands or wants are, and that kind of creates the opportunity for some friction. But truth be told, we really didn't have any major points of that. Just a couple things here and there, but that was really smooth. So collectively, again, without being redundant, like I'm still trying to process and interpret, just how incredible this entire thing was, the process leading up to it, and then the time in Indy was just a really special time this year, and I'm very grateful for the experience.